Ladies and gentlemen, kings and queens, welcome back to another video. It is your host, Yavis Chess Guy, and today we're gonna step away from the reactions for a while. Well, today, and we're gonna do some chess. We're going to learn a new opening today called the King's Gambit. I've been doing a lot of reactions to video games and movies, and I've been streaming a lot of God of War and The Last of Us, and I just want to get back to playing some chess. I am the average chess guy after all. I'm gonna try to mix it in more for the chess viewers. So in the King's Gambit, it's an opening for white, and you start off with e4, and then I opened up the I pretty much opened up the Explorer so we can see what's the most popular move. We're probably going to focus on the ones that are popular, but in this case, we're learning the King's Gambit, so we can't do the King's Gambit without e5. So to get into the King's Gambit opening, you have to play e4, and your opponent has to play. And then after e5, you play f4, pawn f4. This is getting into the King's Gambit opening. Now, it's crazy. If you know the rules or the fundamentals of chess, they say the weakest square or the weakest pawn is the pawn next to the king, because the king is the only thing protecting that pawn, and it's very vulnerable. So in this case, moving that pawn makes the king super vulnerable. And that's not good. That's creating a big weakness. And this is why it's called the King's Gambit, because you're gambiting, exposing the king, creating weaknesses on the king side, as well as you're literally playing f4, giving up a free pawn, because it's not like this is moved, this is protecting the pawn or anything. It's straight up you're weakening your king, exposing your king for attacks, and giving up on an f4 pawn. Why? It's because you want to gambit or give away or take a risk. In most gambits, you're taking a risk for an advantage. So in this case, you want your opponent to take, because when you play e4, e5, both pawns are fighting for the center. This pawn is controlling these squares, and I'm controlling these squares. We're fighting for the center. But as we know in chess, the center is the most important. Taking control of the center is most important. That's where you get the most advantages and the most mobility with all your pieces. That's why the control of the center is best. So to get that control, what we're doing is we're playing f4 with the idea of take back f4, moving the pawn out of the central squares, moving it to the side to where we can then play d4, so we can not only control the center with the two pawns, but also attack all of this in your opponent's territory. And it's just beautiful. However, you're fighting your opponent, and your opponent's going to be fighting back, and this is bad. We don't play d4 right after. Why? Because if you play this, they take, and then you play d4. Remember, you weakened your king in order to get this advantage, and to lose. You're risking or losing your pawn for advantage. But in this case, if you just play d4 right away, what happens is here, and give you a check, and you're in trouble. Now your king, this knight can't protect the check. This bishop is not even on a dark square. It can't protect. Sorry, it can't protect anything. Rook is stuck. This pawn can't attack. And even if you do this, excuse me, the pawn can take, and then you're even more screwed, because now if you take back, you're attacking the queen, but then you just opened up a free rook. So you can't even do that. And then you might be wondering, okay, well, in the beginning when you play f4, you opened up your king earlier. So why couldn't he check you now? You know, this is called the King's Gambit declined knee defense. I'm learning this as I go as well with you guys. But this check doesn't matter, because you can actually push this pawn. This pawn is not here. to take it and then lose your rook. So in this case, you're just attacking the queen, and then the queen then has, he can't go here because of the queen, can't go here because of the bishop, can't go here either because of the queen. The only thing to do is go to any of these squares. Can't go here because of the bishop, because of the pawn, and essentially, it's always good to help to force your opponent to move a piece twice, because it's kind of like they're losing tempo, because he just moved his queen here and then doing this. Now the queen has to go. So it's like you gain tempo, you move the pawn, and then now you not only did you open this, then now you have more. You have you have tempo, because now you're gonna get the development faster into the game, getting an advantage tempo, and then an advantage through like kind of going, because you're already going first as white, and then on top of that, you're gonna get an advantage with just developing your pieces faster, and formulating an attack, or even a better chance of getting an attack, controlling the sensitive board, doing other things. So that's why we don't. That's why the queen doesn't come out right away. So the first thing, let's study. I'm studying just as you are. We're going over it together. So the first move most people do 5,058. And here's another reason why you should do um the the, the king's gambit. Why? Because when you do e4 d4, look how far, look how much games where people face the king's pawn opening, knight f3. Most people will play knight f3, knight c, and you might go into the Royal Lopez, or I think this one here is the Italian game. Whichever one. This is like the basic one that everyone likes to do. Castle, open up, and you kind of get a lot of symmetry a lot in these openings, which is like the beginner things that most people do, because people normally play the Royal Lopez and stuff, because you get to open up your king for castling faster. You get an attack on your opponent's weak pawn. Your knight can then come in here after d3 with the bishop protecting to get um, a fried liver, or just get a fork in the king, or just give a check, or just maybe give a check to your king, and it's just a lot, and a lot of people play it, so a lot of people know it, right? The next best move here, the next most popular move here is knight c3. This is going to into the Vienna game. That's the opening that I love. But look how popular f3 is versus how popular c3 is. That's one of the reasons why I play c3, because look at the percentages of how many people. 263,000 people played knight f3. When you play knight c3, it's only 10,000 people compared to like 30 times that, almost, or 26 times that, whatever. So now it's like, oh, most people never seen that before. So now they have to kind of adjust on the fly. You know what I'm saying? Next, some people will do bishop c4, which is the bishop's opening. But personally, I don't like this one too much. Well, it's not bad, but the bishop can just be attacked a lot. But it's not that it's a bad opening. I've never studied it. But that's the bishop open. Um, Next to that is f4. So essentially, f4 is very, it's still popular but less common than knight f3, knight c3, bishop opening. So playing something like the king's gambit, people is going to be stumped, like, oh, I don't normally face that opening, so that's crazy. Okay, so you play this. Most popular, they accept the king's gambit. Take the pawn, they accept it, they move the pawn out of the center. And this is where you don't play d4 because of queen to h4. You play knight f3. Why? Because you know that queen to h4 is dangerous, so you play knight to f3. What knight to f3 do is that it protects that h4 square. It even protects the e5 square, so this area, and you also get to develop your piece. It also stops the pawn on f4 from even advancing for whatever reason. you know? So in this case, you're preparing essentially to then go d4 to control the nice squares in the center of the. So after this, the most popular move after this, g5. The reason why is in this gambit, you just gave away a pawn. So naturally, your opponent's like, I want to keep this pawn because this pawn is pretty good in terms of like blocking off the G and G3 and E3 squares. So you're limiting space for your opponent. And if you can do G5, you can then protect it, like kind of keep it going, keep it alive, and just keep the advantage. Your opponent wants to keep the advantage of having that. So as white, we don't like that. We don't like this pawn being in our territory, doing all of that. So what we do is most people play H4 because you want your to bait your opponent into taking back. When they take back, they weaken. First of all, these pawns is already doubled the same file. That's a disadvantage right there. He takes here. There also another disadvantage of double pawns on both, files. And then on top of that, separate this pawn from this pawn. So this becomes a weakness. This pawn becomes a weakness. He takes it becomes a weakness. This pawn becomes he is protected by the queen. But the idea is you want them to take and then weaken this pawn. So the idea is you want them to take, and you open up with d4, and then let's say to do something like this, you can here and look how nicely we're controlling the center of the board. We have two pawns in the center. We have a knight out in the towards the center, a bishop in the nice natural squares. All the pieces on their natural squares. The pawns is in the center, and then you can develop faster than your opponent. This is a weakness now because the knight is protecting it. I can take with the rook now. And then I can probably pull out the bishop over here, knight, queen, long side castle, or queen side castle. So that's the idea. But your opponent is battling you. He knows that's what you want. The next popular move is g4, threatening the knight. So in this case, there's two moves you could do. Most people in this, the most popular move here is for them to go knight e5. This is a threat because the knight is literally in the center squares, has all of this mobility to attack stuff, just possibilities. Um, and it's also just like getting away from being attacked from this. But then the pawn is not vulnerable. Here next, my queen is protecting, so even if he opens this up to protect it, I take here. Even if we trade, I win a pawn back. Plus, when my queen come out, I can take back this pawn on f4. There's just a lot you can do. And then on top of that, you're weakening your opponent's king side as well. Some people go over here. I don't know which one's better. I would have to like look it up. This one, let's see what this one's called. Skitsir Gambit. I don't know how to pronounce that at all, but it's a different gambit. Going this way is called the Algazer or Azur Gambit. So I don't know which one's better. Let's see what's played. So E5 is played more. So that's more popular. So if you do that, people might know what that is. So maybe I don't know if it's good or not, but maybe if you could do G5, maybe most people wouldn't like because if you go back, right, this move 355 people have played that. Like there's 355 games out there where it's the most popular move essentially is what I'm saying. But only 47 play G5. So maybe if you play G5, um they wouldn't know what to do. Wouldn't know what to do. So let's go with the most popular though, because that's what we would see first more often. Because when you do five, the next popular move is F6. Here at F6. Um, reason why they're playing knight F6, he's trying to develop his pieces on the side and put an attack on E4. E4 is not protected. And then this is where um so this is where if they do this, you don't defend it with this or something like that. One, defending it like this sucks because block off your your light square bishop from getting into the game and formulating an attack in this natural square. Um, and the reason why you want to ignore it, you're baiting your opponent to take it by going to c4. Why? Because at c4 you have an attack on f7. You have the knight attacking f7, and essentially it's almost like a fried liver where your knight makes it over here and then get a fork on the queen, rook, and pretty much, you know, creating a big advantage slash probably winning the game by trading get one of those pieces. Most likely, they're gonna lose a rook. They don't even have anything to take the knight back. So that's the most popular move. People would ignore this attack on e4. They'll play bishop c4. That's the most popular move by far. Then in this situation, people would play d5, which is blocking off the bishop going, going to f7 and kind of like forking e pawn and the bishop c4. This is where um have no choice because you don't want to lose your bishop or lose a pawn. You just take back. Everybody plays taking back. And then the most popular move here is bishop d6. Let's go bishop d6. Developing again with ideas of maybe castling and using the fact that they have this G file open to put the rook there on an attack on our. Because mind you, when we play the King's Gambit, we're weakening our king side with probably plans to castle long on the queen side. But because we're doing so much already from the king side, we just gotta be mindful. This is everything has a weakness, and like right now, all of this is like still not developed. But however, his is not developed either, so we're good. Um, the most popular after that is d4. Reason why is because d4 puts another pawn in the center, as well as it protects the knight on 5, and you kind of want to keep the pressure and keep the knight in the center of the board attacking things. And the idea is if he takes back, you can take with the pawn. Like if he takes here, you can take with the pawn. And then not only are you attacking this knight and creating more tempo for yourself, because he's forced to move the knight because you don't want to lose this trade of a pawn knight. Um, I also have so the pawns that were here moved up into their territory and now is controlling these squares, which is this knight can't even come in this natural central natural location. And this pawn is not only protected from the queen, it's also protected from the bishop, being an attack on the knight, and it's a lot. And according to this, there's no games in the database. This is where we would stop, and then you just kind of play chess or practice. Use the engine to learn, okay, what moves in not. So, but they're not gonna do that. Most people, it's not gonna take knight h5. From here, I don't know what knight 5 is all about. Um, I think it's probably just protecting the pawn on f4 and just kind of getting out of this idea, whatnot, protecting this pawn. Probably because he wants to keep, and because he has a good pawns in my territory, taking taking control of these squares. So then after that, the next popular move is knight c3. This is just more of a developing move, adding more attack in the center, adding a knight to the center. Our center is looking really nice. According to this already, like these games here, the first two is already like 83% white wins, 100% white wins. The most popular is Queen e7. Queen e7 because it's just like a pin on the knight to the king, with maybe some hope that I might castle king side. which I'm not sure if it's good or bad, but the benefit of gambiting the F pawn, that if you do castle kingside, you still have a pawn on G2 protecting the king that he can hide and maneuver around. But also when you castle, then a nice rook to F1, you know, a strong with a strong attack essentially going down F5 on the king on your opponent's king side. So it's pretty good. So this happens most likely. And then these last two games, yes, we can kind of stop here, but most popular people either castle because you want this here. So essentially next turn you can takes back, take, get a nice thing here, knight. And then the advantage is just on as you can see here, the advantage is on white is winning. You could also do this, do a check, and the check is nice because essentially you get to um, check the king. Hopefully he moves, but most likely he's not trying to move because he wants castle for safety. So there's a few things that people might do here. They either move to d8 or f8, or they do c6, which is this. But I'm not sure how good c6 is. I believe probably take. Well, I can't take knight to d5. Yeah, I'm learning. I'm learning just as you guys are learning too. So the idea is if this wasn't pinned, you can go c6. He's forced to take because of fork. Then you take with the bishop, which then would lead fork on the rook. You're practically winning the game. You're gonna win. I think I would recommend castling kingside first to get this. So before doing this, I would castle kingside first to get out of the pin. Um, and then and this is dangerous because you would think, oh, I can win a pawn. Forced to take, pinned, pinned to the king. Now here he's probably forced to take back, and it's game over. um, so yeah, that's the main line. The King's Gambit. Now, however, so here's the issue. We're only probably going to focus on the top three. That's essentially the main line of what happens when they accept the game. Now, what happens if they decline the gambit? Most people will play d5. It's kind of like a counter. It is a counter gambit. It's the Falk Bear counter gambit, where you're gambiting your f pawn, but then they're gambiting their d5. And the most popular move here is that you would take d5 on accepting the counter gambit. And then I don't believe they take here. I think they push with e4. Yes, that's the most popular move. Why? Because you want a pawn in their territory, causing some conflict. The next natural move is at f3. So what tends to happen here is you can't come here because the pawn is just going to take, and you're going to lose automatically at a high level. You're going to lose the game. You lose a knight to a pawn like that. So this pawn is very, very good because it controls the d3 and f3 squares, and then the knight going to f3 is not possible. So he wants to go to h3 if you do want to develop him, or go to e2. But as you know, if the knight goes to h3, the horsey or the knight on the rim is dim, meaning when the knight is in the corner of the square, it doesn't have a lot of mobility from versus in the center mobility. So that's the most popular. If they decline it, if they so essentially we just learned if they counter gambit, take it, they're gonna push. After that, you play d3. D3. Um, it's another gambit. So essentially, you're gambiting another pawn. It was a gambit on top of gambits. So you're gambiting another pawn with the idea of possibly taking and It's kind of like getting rid of that pawn naturally. This, do this, but you wouldn't do bishop to d3. Why? Is because you do bishop to d3, this pawn would not be protected because the queen was protecting this, and the queen would just end up taking it. So, so the most popular move here, people will play d3 just to get rid of this e4 because it's very dangerous. You don't want them to end up doing f5 to solidify that nice center. So after you do this, the idea is this: queen takes, and then natural development of f6, 3, 5. Where's c5? 5, d2, and then most likely the idea is to castle long. And white, I believe, here has an advantage, and in fact, most of the games here, white win. The only game where white loses if this when they play knight to d7. But these are just like one or two loss. For the most part, white has a better advantage. You have a queen here, your castle long, knight out, pawns in the center. Um, Most likely, whatever opening your opponent likes, they're completely out of that opening because they're not used to the gambit and all that stuff. Now, what if they don't take it? Next popular move here, they'll play knight f6, and knight f6 attacks e5, attacks to e4. Guess the idea is when you do take back the e4, you're gonna take with the 152 games goes like just like this. These are the top main line moves that you would see in the boom. But the knight is in the center. It loves it there. Knight's in the center. Most likely he might want to take the bishop or pawn. Probably a pawn. Maybe the bishop. And then when this happens, people, we're not developed. He has a knight in the center. So this is where you want to develop. So 3 happens. 5, bishop c5. Queen 2 is the next natural move. I think is because now the queen move is to pin the knight to the king. Ideas of probably to win f5, protecting it. c3, doing the same thing to attack it. Queen e7 as protection. 1, 2 attackers, 2 defenders. So now we're literally battling for this e4 square. Literally. Next after this is bishop e3. Bishop e bishop e3. I think the reason why is because it opened up, this diagonal is cutting through the king side, and it's pretty strong. So it's just a way of developing your piece, cutting off a stronger piece at the moment, and getting rid of it. But in this case, knight captures c3. I understand why. It's because it's being an attack here, and what happens is with knight capturing, you're forced to capture back because. But then they get an advantage for double because you get your pawns doubled up, and then from there, that's there's no more games after that. You know, that's the idea. Um, but when you do this, it's bad because bishop will take, and then you can't really take back because the queen will come in. Then you're then you're in trouble. Oh God, now you can't castle. It's just a lot. So most people they don't take back. What they do is they take the bishop. Take the bishop. Why? Because it takes here, you can take back with the bishop and protect the king. Um, and takes there, take here first. You takes. You actually, I think you actually just won a piece. Oh no, you didn't. Knight for knight, bishop. And they decide if they want to go or not. So they take, you take, knight e2, bishop e7, knight f4, grabbing the pawn. Then the next popular move is bishop a3, just moving out of the way, but also stopping him from the side. Did he win a pawn? I'm not too sure. One got back the pawn forward that knight move, stopping him from castling here. The next popular move is knight 7, 7, because it can't go to knight because of this pawn. They can't go to 6. Otherwise, it would have went knight 6. Long castle, they long castle because they can't go. They can't kingside castle. From here, it's literally saying that white has. So you can kind of stop it here. So this is essentially what happens all the way back from if they decline, most people's gonna play on to D. You just gotta remember you take it, push, you try to get rid of it. Most people would do this. If they take it, cool, you just take back with the queen. And then you keep playing. If they don't take it, they'll do this. Take, they take back, knight f3. That's a popular move, right? Knight f3. Bishop c5, because they're trying to go here. e2 to pin. After that, what they do? f5. It's kind of what happens in the Falk Bear, counter gambit. Accepted essentially. After this, what happened? Boom. They take, but they can't take yet. What was it? Yeah, e2. Was it knight first? Yep, knight c3. They do this. Block the bishop. Now that the knight is not going to be pinned, this or whatever. And this is where they take, take, take. Moves out the way, grab the pawn back, go backwards, and essentially he goes here. Everybody just side castle. Then white has, I believe, has an advantage. Or at least according to this in this specific game. So yeah, that's kind of how you play that. There's another popular move, bishop c4, which is bishop opening. Oh no, sorry. Boom. The next popular move that we're gonna, and the last move we're gonna go over, because these are the most three. Most people take. We learned that most people take, but someone might play bishop d4. Let's go over that. When bishop d3 comes, the most popular you'll see at f3, 6. This is the classical King's Gambit decline variation. How we know what makes it classical. Right. So when the bishop plays the c5, we just learned that the King's Gambit decline is the classical variation. Right? And you play knight f3, play d6, pretty much protecting that piece. The reason why we're playing knight f3, why? Because we need to protect that h4 square. You can't just take right away. You have to take. That's why he developed afterwards. After that, c3, you're just developing naturally your two knights. And they'll do f6, developing as well. And then they're saying here knight c4. So literally after this, if they're doing the classical variation of the king, you're literally developing to the natural squares in the classical. Literally. Then knight c6. Literally, that's all we're doing here. Then d3. And it kind of almost, it reminds me of like the Italian game. The only difference is that you have the f pawn to f4 versus it just 2. So this is kind of almost transposing into or looking like an Italian game setup. You do d3. The reason why you're doing d3 is like this pawn, have a nice chain of pawn center. This always looks nice. Then the next popular is bishop g4. Bishop g4. Oh, he's pinning the knight to the queen. Knight a4. This knight a4 idea is like a typical idea that we would see because they're trying to get rid of this bishop. Plus, if you're successful to take, they take back with the pawn and double up there, creating a weakness. That's like the thing in chess. Creating weaknesses in chess is so important. So this is an attempt to take this bishop. Bishop can't go here because of the knight. Can't go here because of the bishop. Can't go here because of the king. Can't go here because of the and can't go here because of the pawn. It can go here and check, but then here, then here, and kind of trap it. The best move. Normally they'll go backwards. Then with this, although they're gonna lose the bishop, um, create a disadvantage or create a weakness double pawns. When we take back, they go here, you take back with the pawn, open up the rook to come early. It's a good thing. The next popular move is after that, bishop b6. B6, like I said, then normally would take, then c3. I like this. I call this like the ladder. I kind of like this because kind of like, protects. Look how much squares is really lacking, especially with this kind of all the pawns is essentially taking up these squares and attacking the just so powerful. The little steps is like steps of pawn. And then someone finally takes, and you take back, finally developing piece, and knight e3, waiting the knight, keeping your bishop pair. Bishop pair is very important in the game. And then this is the last, games where this is like the setup that people would have. Take, take, queen check. King just kind of, you know. So that this is kind of like the setup you'll have. But in this situation, I think white is better because you created a weakness here. However, you created a con for this rook to come into the game on a file. However, the king is not on the side and not really doing anything right now. Um, and then you have an amazing set of, excuse me, setup of pawns. All you got to do now is get your king to safety. I don't know what would you do here. But my idea would be to do this to kick out. Don't think he can take here because you can back and you can try to castle. Queen and knight is on this side. Now the queen literally has to move out. You could even do this. The idea is this. You just gotta play chess and figure it out. So that, my friend, is the King's Gambit. This is the King's Gambit. Of course, there's a lot more studying to um, a lot more studying to do, but those are the three popular moves you'll face. Um, that you'll definitely face, which is King's Gambit accepted, Gambit decline. Well, it's King's Gambit decline, but it's like a counter Gambit. They're gambiting their pawn, and then there's the King's Gambit classical variation, bishop. Those are the three popular moves. You're most likely gonna see just King's Gambit accepted. And then we already know how we play this. Once they take, knight, leave, protect it. Boom, they push, move here or here at f6. And then after this, bishop c4. Now, I even heard that there was something you can do where you can dead. I think it was something where you take, push. I think it moved, grab. This is, yeah, you grab the pawn here, back here, back, get something like this, king again. Then it kind of gets messy for the side. Bishop out. But I think you take, he moves. Bishop out with check, back or something. And then you just get a whole advantage, with this, essentially. But this is the King's Gambit. Of course, if you need study more lines, because as we know, it's going to be so because you're not gonna all most likely you're gonna see this, you're gonna see this second, or you're gonna see the classical third. Everything else is like you're rarely going to see, but somebody might play c6, then you play c3, then they capture, and you play the knight because you want to make sure and cover this square. So you're developing normal, and they try to protect it. H4, the same. So this transposed into the exact same ideas right here, except differences 6. And then here, you see the take move, get the center. But that take is like another sacrifice in order to get the king from castling. Check the king. The king moves. You kind of sacrifice, but you get a whole bunch of pawns. Open up the king for attack, and on top of that, the enemy is still underdeveloped. Look how much pieces we developed. So you're sacrificing development and putting an attack on the king. It's crazy. At f6, castle, using the f file for an attack on the king. Got a bishop going through here, and queen. The idea is if the queen could come over here. That's why in the beginning, some people try to, instead of doing this, doing d4, some people try to get in there right away. Or what they would do here, they would check first. He goes back, get this right away, so you can kind of have this kind of setup. This happens, take here, attack here. They might do something like this, kind of block you. Then you can castle with ideas of if you take, they take back, you take back with the rook. Just a lot. I'd even do something like this instead, but he can't even castle this way. Up. It's just a lot. It's just a lot. So we just learned a lot about the King Gambit. It's a great opening to try. A lot of people don't face it. Even I'm my highest rating is 1624. I'm currently like 1530. And I don't see any King's Gambit at all. And I'm an E4 player for white. So that's just to let you know. But this is just a gist of helping and teaching you guys what to expect when playing the King's Gambit. Um, if you see anything different, you just have to go back into the Explorer and like see those moves. Because here at the King's Gambit, there's a lot more moves that we just haven't seen. But as you can see, the more you go down here, the more you realize, the more you go down, the more you realize, look, all of these are bad. All of these responses are bad, and white just straight up wins. So that's just the gist of it. Thank you guys for watching. Hope this was informational. I hope this was good content for you guys trying to be better or learning for white. Up your opponents, gambit a pawn, get an advantage. If you're the type of person to like be aggressive and fast and attack, this is a good use. So thank watching, and I'll see you guys, ladies and gentlemen, kings and queens, in the next video. That was fun. I'm not gonna lie, I learned a lot myself. Peace out.